Well, and last week I participated in a debate in the Chamber on the Additional Support and Learning Bill. And here's a little extract from what I said.
George Foulkes, to be followed by Christine McKelvey.
Officer, can I also add my very sincere congratulations to Anne McLaughlin for what was a really excellent multilingual maiden speech. And she and I, like Helen and Anne, do share something as well. Although hers in rather more tragic circumstances, we were both somewhat surprised to become members of this Parliament, but absolutely delighted, I know, in both cases. I welcome the opportunity, Presiding Officer, of saying a few words in this debate. As you may remember, way back in the 1970s, I was chair of Lothian and COSLA education committees, and education in Scotland, thankfully, has changed and moved forward a lot since then, mostly for the better. I hope I'll be excused if I don't understand some of the modern jargon and some of the technicalities, but there have been particular improvements in this area of education. And I don't think, and in fact I'm absolutely certain, that we wouldn't have been able to give it such detailed consideration without a Scottish Parliament. We'd have never had the time at Westminster before devolution to go into it in such detail, and that is one of the advantages of devolution. So a lot has been done, but this bill recognises that a lot more needs to be done. And one of the things that worries me is that the system might become too complicated and difficult for parents to understand, and some young people might slip through. I think the essential elements of the system are that it should be sympathetic, and then, as Margaret Smith described extremely well, as simple as possible, comprehensive, parent-friendly, and establish clear rights and be proactive. And that's why I was very impressed by the representations of children in Scotland. Now, everyone's been talking about consensus and consensual. I remember when Donald Dewar was, we were talking about George Galloway, and I said to Donald, he's his own worst enemy. And Donald said, not while I'm around, he isn't. And some people might think when George is speaking, consensus might just break down. This George, I mean, not the other one, the baldy heated one. So it might just break down a little, and I hope you'll apologise. You'll forgive me for that. But I think that it is the duty of the opposition and opposition members and backbench members as well to point out some of the deficiencies in legislation and proposed legislation. And children in Scotland point the way forward. They say that, rightly in my view, the government amendments don't go far enough, and they make proposals for further amendments to improve it. And in particular, I agree with them, first of all, the danger that only the most confident and articulate parents will know their rights and secure support and advocacy. And as others have said, we must remember those in particularly difficult circumstances. I also think they make a good point that councils and schools must become more active in informing parents, carers and pupils about their rights, and that the definition of parents should be widened in line with the new UK gender equality legislation, and that there should be a quick and fair system of resolving any disagreements, as some members have already said, with the tribunal seen as the last resort, not as the first resort. And as my friend Helen Eadie and others have said, that consideration should be given to the funding of advocacy right, so that when they are putting forward the case, then they are not disadvantaged financially in any way. And that consideration should also be given to more routine and meaningful consultations during the operation of the system. And finally, that the duty of education authorities to plan for young people as they leave school before 18, that duty should be strengthened. I think those are very good ways in which the legislation can be improved, even beyond the amendments that the Minister has already agreed to. And can I finally say that I was therefore greatly disappointed to receive only this morning, as Helen Eadie pointed out, the representations from COSLA. I think all the other representations have been helpful. As I said, I used to be COSLA Education Chairman. I think this was a particularly disappointing representation, to say the least. All that they said is this is going to cost money, therefore don't consider it. That's a summary of it, and I think it's a rather unfortunate summary. Now, I know the SNP members will say George is about to return to type, but it's true, it's the case that the council tax freeze is already resulting in dangerous cuts to local services. I mean, that follows clearly as night follows day. If you cut the money available to local councils, then they are forced to cut the services. And now what we are seeing is that the local authorities are using this council tax freeze as an excuse to try to undermine much-needed improvements in services to a particularly vulnerable section of society. Well, I hope that this Parliament, and above all, I hope, Karen, the Education Committee, in its considerations, will put, and I know you will, and I hope your whole committee will, put the interests of these children and their families first, and not accept the constraints that COSLA are trying to put on you, because, as many members have said here, far more eloquently than I have, that the parents who have these children really need to be considered most sympathetically, and not the constraints, the financial constraints, and in some cases the artificial financial constraints that the councils are pleading for reasons for not doing something which is absolutely vital.
Christina McKelvey.